Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just can I have your attention, please, just for some general safety information. First of all, just take note of the emergency exits at the back of the room. If anybody needs help, there are members of the PCSA staff here in the room, and obviously the meeting is streamed live and a recording will be made. So if everyone, just for the meeting to run smoothly, if you can just check your phones now, switch them off or put them to airline mode, and just be aware that anybody here could be part of the record of the meeting. Silence at all times, please. If you do need to leave the room, that's fine, but just do it quietly. And if you need help, as I said, just contact some of the members of staff from the Policing and Community Safety Authority. As usual today, it is an engagement between the authority and the Director of the National Office of Community Safety, so there's no opportunity for other people to ask questions. You're here to observe. So thank you very much, everyone. Over to you, Chairperson.
It's very appropriate that this is the first meeting of the Policing and Community Safety Authority outside of Dublin, that it's in Wexford with the community, and that's very much what we have to discuss here today, how communities can be part of the solution and part of the infrastructure of decision making across the country. So on behalf of the authority, we very much warmly welcome the National Coordinator for the Office of Community Safety, the Director, Gráinne Berrill, and I look forward to the engagement for the next 45 minutes with two of our members. And to lead off, we will have Martina Maloney, who will talk to you around the national part of your office, and then Mick Feehan will begin a conversation with you around the local aspect. So I turn now to Martina.
Great. Thank you, Chair, and you're very welcome, Gráinne. It's really good to have this first official engagement in public with you, and I know that it's a very exciting time with the establishment of your Office for Community Safety and also for the rollout of the local community safety partnerships. I know this has been a long time in gestation, but it is now that we have the Policing and Community Safety Act in place that you've been working hard to get it off the ground. So I suppose I'd like, maybe it's unprecedented in terms of a whole of government approach to look at the area of community safety. So maybe you'd outline to us what your role is and what the office that you hold does.
Thanks, Martina. Yeah, so as you've mentioned there, the Policing, Security and Community Safety Act, which was commenced earlier this year, establishes...
Staff are, there's a bit of construction in the background for anyone looking online, but we're going to sort that out as part of the office here, so we'll just continue on, and our apologies for any interruptions, which will be very short-lived.
Thanks, Elaine, and thanks, Martina, again. So you referenced there the Policing, Security and Community Safety Act. It actually establishes a whole infrastructure to support, Elaine referenced there, this new approach to community safety where it is a whole of government approach and it's unprecedented. The National Office is just one element of that infrastructure. So there's a National Community Safety Steering Group on which the Policing and Community Safety Authority, and Garda Síochána, HSE Tusla, Coon, and a wide variety of government departments are represented, so kind of as an overarching structure. There's the National Office, and importantly, there will be 36 local community safety partnerships. So the role of the National Office to a great extent is a connector between the various elements of that infrastructure. So we provide support, and I, as the director, am an ex officio member of the National Community Safety Steering Group, but we also have statutory functions in relation to providing support, training and guidance to local community safety partnerships, so all 36. So we've been working hard with our colleagues in both the local authorities and other statutory agencies on that for the past number of months, as you're aware. We have other functions within the legislation as well, which is around the promotion of community safety issues. It's around we will, as we move forward, be conducting commissioning research in relation to the functions of our office and the community safety partnerships. And I suppose importantly at the moment, because I've just come from a consultation here in Wexford. In the legislation, there will be a national strategy for improving community safety. So the National Office has a role in implementing that strategy as well. And at the moment, are in the process of developing the strategy itself.
I beg your pardon. Could you explain to us what the term community safety means?
Well, there's a debate. I'm smiling because as we're embarking on the exercise of doing the strategy, one of our questions is defining community safety. But I suppose in this context, it's really about people being and feeling safe, and felt safety being just as important. So that kind of perception of safety is really important. And I suppose the genesis of all of this was back in 2018 when the Commission of Future and Policing in Ireland, their report was published. And it was really that piece that community safety is much more than on Garda Síochána, like the responsibility is much broader. There are lots and lots of factors and issues that relate to how people both feel and are safe in their communities. I suppose in terms of the context of what we're establishing now in terms of local community safety partnerships and that broader piece, it's that idea, I suppose, that every community is different and has different issues and has different problems, and also that every community can have responses to those problems as well. So the local aspect, there's a national and local infrastructure. The local infrastructure is very important, but also that responding to those issues at local level and at national level, but let's say the local level here, it requires a wide range of inputs from a variety of agencies and the community themselves as well. So I suppose it's really that bottom-up approach, and it's about recognising what are the issues within communities themselves. So, and I know we're going to speak to the local, but in terms of the local community safety partnerships, every local community safety partnership must develop its own local community safety plan, and local community safety partnerships within the legislation must consult with communities on those plans. So I suppose community safety it's very broad, it means different things to everybody, but the important thing is about hearing what it means for people on the ground, and then developing, being very solution focused, if you like, and developing concrete solutions and bringing agencies and the community together to develop those solutions at local level and at national level, actually.
And just drawn on the work you're doing on the preparation of your own national strategy, could you just maybe explain to us what that will look like and what the process and timelines you're working to are?
So the timeline is quite tight from a statutory perspective. So within the legislation, a draft of the strategies to be brought to government within a year of the enactment of the Act. But at the moment, we're in the process of we're in an engagement process. So right now, there's an issues paper. There was a few like when we did a literature review, there was a number of thematic issues, like defining community safety was one of them. And we have sent that issues paper out to, my last check, I think was about 180 odd organisations, many of which are umbrella organisations. So if everybody responded, you could have 680 organisations responding. So that's the first, so it's a written submission piece. And at the moment, we're in the midst of an engagement piece. So as I said earlier, and I know a number of people who attended the engagement here in Wexford earlier on are here today, and thank you for coming to both. So we're kind of doing community engagements in a number of areas. We've done 4 in the last week. 10 days, and we'll be in Limerick then next week, and we're doing a session with the Islands community. So we're doing a variety of engagements. We've targeted groupings, so we're meeting with young people specifically, we're meeting with older people specifically, we're meeting with people with disabilities specifically, because to speak to that piece earlier, everybody has a different experience of community safety, so recognising those different experiences. In the new year, we will have an online survey that'll be a public survey for everybody to submit responses to. So I suppose, again, if people want to, we do have a community safety page, gov.ie/community safety. People can find our strategy page there and link into that, or email us in at strategy@communitysafety.ie, and if they want to receive a copy of the online survey. Then there's the exercise of analysing all of that data and then kind of working through it and looking at all, because it is a whole of government response, and we do recognise that there is a whole suite of other policies and pieces of legislation that could intersect with the work that we're doing. So producing that strategy at the end. But I should say it is the first iteration, so it will be a foundational framework. Do you know what I mean? So it's foundation, it's a starting point. One of the first questions you asked there is, what do we mean by community safety? Do you know what I mean? Like, so what are the boundaries? What are they, and how might we all collaboratively work together? The National Community Safety Steering Group has a really important role to play here and have been very supportive to us in that exercise process. And just to mention, obviously, the PCSA are represented there. Helen is a member. So they've been really excellent at giving us direction and support around developing the strategy. And we're meeting next week, and we'll be presenting on where we're at so far and then looking at how we go into next year with the strategy. But it is a foundational framework is probably the best way to look at it, and it's high level kind of priority thematic areas. So it's what we anticipate.
So why would you encourage people to actually engage with your office now on the preparation of the strategy?
Because everybody does have there's a lot of different views on community safety, a lot of different experiences. In the consultations that we've had to date, there's been really valuable and rich engagement. I don't know if one of the reasons I ran here in the end was, you're chatting to people at the end, and one person I was speaking to was very strong on saying, like, well, there were no young people in this room. Do you know what I mean? Like, so we want to hear all the variety of voices and variety of experiences of community safety. And also, I mentioned there about the community voice being very important, both in the legislation and in this approach to community safety. So there is that piece about the people who are closest to the problem being closer to the solution. And we've gotten some really, really interesting and rich data. And I know Mick's going to speak to the local, but I was struck when Elaine opened there about that kind of community engagement and decision making. I hope I reflected well with the people who were here in the room. But one of the things that was being talked about was infrastructure. For that idea, community safety is about being able to open your door and feel safe. That was, and thank you for the person who actually gave that phrase earlier on. But also there was very much a conversation around the kind of an infrastructure to support that as well, whether that's capital infrastructure, but also community infrastructure. So you asked the question about why would you encourage people to engage. It's because everybody's voice is important in this, and we want to hear differing perspectives and different kind of experiences of community safety, but also there's opportunities to hear solutions as well.
To participation in this?
I suppose that's an ongoing work. We have to work. There's an element of, we use the phrase collaboration quite a lot. So it's our role as the National Office in working with our colleagues. The National Community Safety Steering Group again has a very important role to play there as well. Are the statutory agencies who are involved in the process, whether it's there's the strategy is one piece, but obviously the local community safety partnerships are a hugely important delivery agent, if you like, of this kind of whole of government approach to community safety. And we've had fantastic buy-in. So, on Garda Síochána, for example, we work really closely with the Garda National Community Engagement Bureau, and we're making sure that there is exceptional buy-in there. And the HSE, the Access and Integration Office, have been very supportive. In Tusla, the operations management team have been, so we work at that level, but also at local level, obviously at the partnership level, there's that kind of engagement as well. So collaboration is a process of building trust and relationships at all levels. And I suppose that's going to be an ongoing work in terms of our office. But I suppose there is that statutory responsibility as well. There is a statutory responsibility within the legislation for the agencies to cooperate with one another and work together in relation to community safety. So there is, that's the stick, if you like, but there is a statutory obligation on all public sector bodies. And a colleague of mine in the office would be remiss if I didn't mention Section 118 in the Act, which actually is a specific function. So all public sector bodies must report on, a bit like the human rights public service obligations, so their duty. So there is that, it's actually in the legislation that organisations, like statutory bodies, must cooperate with each other in relation to issues relating to community safety.
Gives you quite a lot of clout and power. Okay. So in terms of, I suppose, resources then, you're a relatively small office. Are you adequately resourced?
$1 million question. I suppose we're in the middle of an extremely busy period at the moment, so it is challenging to deliver on low resources. I will have to give a big mark out to the team. They're absolutely fantastic, and everybody's doing exceptional work. You can always do with more resources. That's and I mean that genuinely, but I mean, as a team, very committed to getting this across the line. As we move forward, it's probably telling right at the moment. We're really in the heat of things at the moment because a lot of local community safety partnerships are being stood up at the moment. So I didn't, just to say, there's been quite a bit of development since even the last day I met with yourself. So like 9 have held their inaugural meetings now at this point, about 5 this week actually. And we've had 20 with members appointed, but we have, I think, trying to remember now, I think it's about, there's people in the room who know this information better than me, 9 or 10 are going through tomorrow. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's really, really hectic at the moment. We're doing the strategy consultation, so we're very under-resourced for what we're doing right now. And it's, I suppose, as we move forward, it's going to be hard to tell what level of resources that we would require.
And Mick will be going into it in more detail, but could you maybe outline to us what's your relationship with the local community safety partnership specifically?
Oh, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a statutory function to provide training, guidance and support. So before the partnerships were established, we were doing a lot of work in terms of developing a guidance document for the partnerships in terms of their operation and establishment. There were staff in place who were starting getting the groundwork done, and we were engaging with them on a regular basis and engage with them on a very regular basis now. So at this point, we have more or less monthly meetings with them as collective, and I suppose our team provide a lot of support as well to the community safety partnership staff. So I suppose I should reference the Department of Justice, Home Affairs and Migration, of which the National Office is an office of, are resourcing 2 full-time staff in every local authority to support the local community safety partnerships. So there's a there's a coordinator at grade 7 and administrator at grade 4, and that's a really important resource in terms of, I suppose, consistency and support to the partnership themselves as a whole. And I suppose that's one of our key connectors with not necessarily all the members of the partnership in the immediate term, but with the partnership's establishment. It's through the community safety partnership team. Also very strongly working with the local authorities where they're hosted to support the establishment of the partnerships as well. And on an ongoing basis, we will have a function around providing training, guidance and support. And we anticipate developing training for the partner members as well, and recognition of, all the members, but I suppose our voluntary members really kind of providing as much support as we can there as well. Just in relation, I suppose, as well, the guidance document was issued, but it's an ongoing learning process as well. So I didn't reference that there were 3 pilots. The Department of Justice had 3 pilots in Longford, Waterford and the North Inner City, and they were independently evaluated. So a lot of the learning from that has gone into the establishment of the partnerships. But it's not a one and done. We have to keep evolving and learning, and as we all know, community safety continues evolving and changing as well. So we have to be, I suppose we're a mechanism or a portal, if you like, for if there's challenges on the ground, that they can be brought into the national office and potentially brought up to the National Community Safety Steering Group if required. Do you know the way? Like, so it's we provide that kind of ongoing support and training to the partnerships. I would just quickly reference the chairs. So the coordinator and the administrator are a key element of the partnerships, the support structure for the partnerships. But each local community safety partnership will elect their own chair from their membership themselves, and they're obviously an extremely important element or individual, but they're an extremely important part of the support structure for the partnerships as a whole. And that really came out very strongly in the evaluation. Both the chair and the coordinator are really a success determinant for the partnerships. So we have a date in the diary of the 5th of February next year to bring all of the chairs together, and the coordinators and administrators as well. And we're going to be developing chairs networks and coordinator networks and so on. And I suppose it's a function then of our office to actually provide support to those networks as well.
Gráinne, and we had the pleasure yesterday of meeting both the chair and the coordinator and some members of the group here in Wexford. So it's great to see it up and running, and of course Wexford claims to be the first in the country.
Is the first. It's not from the pilot, the first established under the statutory legislation.
So in terms of I suppose you've had the pilots and you had the Drogheda Implementation Board. Are there any practical examples that you would like to cite for us as to the impact these organisations, these groups of people coming together as the LCSPs can have?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So I suppose thinking specifically about the function, the PCSA and the policing side, and that we're broadening out community safety being beyond the responsibility of Garda Síochána, but it can also enhance, I suppose, Garda Síochána's policing in partnership with community. So I'm going to pick Longford, Martina. So one of the examples there is when the consultation was happening in Longford, I suppose victims maybe not feeling comfortable or confident, particularly in instances of DSGBV, domestic violence, going into the Garda station, and that, basically that, we needed to, in the area, and I'm obviously paraphrasing, that there was a need, I suppose, to bring agencies together and look at domestic sexual gender-based violence together. And so there was Sir Janine, who was the coordinator of the Longford Local Community Safety Partnership, and others in the community brought together a network to look at domestic sexual gender-based violence in the area. The local Longford Women's Link were a member of that. Both the Local Community Safety Partnership and Longford Women's Link applied for funding through the Community Safety Fund, and they actually developed a training programme that was delivered, and Garda members, domestic violence services, community services, CIPSI, they all came together and all did the same training, so they all had the same language. But a key thing that came out of that was, and this is the bit, the magic of having a group of people coming together, over the cup of coffee on the break from the training, because the training was very specialised training. It's Jane Monkton-Smith's, and it was to do with the recognising the 8 steps to domestic homicide. And they were having a side conversation, and the conversation was very around, I suppose, victims not feeling safe going into the Garda station to report. And when we had when I say we, I was the coordinator of Drogheda Implementation Board at the time, and Longford Local Community Safety Partnership, Newry, Mourne and Down, Policing Community Safety Partnership and ourselves partnered on a cross-border conference. And one of the things that we learned was this kind of soft interview room concept, so where you could, a victim could go in through a separate entrance, and it didn't feel like a space going into Garda Station. So in Longford Garda Station, they actually implemented the soft interview room, and it's like, if you saw it, it actually looks like a lovely living room, and really, really inviting, really safe, really warm and welcoming. And so then the local services knew, they could tell their service users, their clients about, like, well, you won't be going into the station, you'll actually be going into the nice room there. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's a very practical piece of how the broader community conversations can enhance Garda responses to issues, community safety issues.
Thank you. And I suppose you mentioned that this isn't just about policing and on Garda Síochána's role. Are there examples of how other agencies might have come on board to help to address some of the identified community safety issues?
Yeah, actually Waterford, near neighbours here, who was a pilot as well. So Waterford, when they were doing their consultation, in a particular area, it was identified there was a lot of antisocial behaviour happening. And it was, I suppose, as happens, there's an unoccupied house, there's like there's a ground beside it that's, I use the word derelict, but the way it's unused ground, and it's ripe for all sorts of activity happening. And that was recognised and identified and through their plan. And so the Local Community Safety Partnership applied for some funding to, so basically the local authority said, well, we can use that house for a different purpose. The Local Community Safety Partnership applied for some funding through the Community Safety Fund to do kind of some refurb and so on the house. And they did a number of other actions as well. Then the local ETB, so it was also identified that for young people in that area, maybe other activities could be provided as well. So the ETB came in to deliver horticulture and other courses from the house as well. Then they have identified allotments in the area, so that unused ground is now it's been moved into allotments. So you have, there's young men from the area doing training courses in this house around horticulture, going out then, and then there's the allotments, and there's that ownership then of that community space. So, but the Gardaí were key members of that as well, because they'd identified the area, but also they were working, the community guards are down in space as well with the lads who are doing the training and with the allotments. So it's kind of a broad range of services coming together with it's very community focused response, but to what would be identified as a community safety issue.
Just maybe my final question before I pass you over to Mick. How will you know that this has been successful? How will you measure the impact?
I have notes here, and that was one of the things I wrote down, but I'm going to speak verbatim. It is going to be a challenge. So one of the questions we're asking in the strategy consultation is around measurement. How do we measure success? What is important to communities in terms of what we measure as well? because data is one thing, but we talk about felt safety as well. So in terms of that kind of, we want to go through the process of the strategy in terms of looking at that and seeing what might come out of that. But I suppose, looking for my notes here, I suppose for myself, sustained community involvement in identifying needs and co-designing solutions. So that like in 10 years' time, that we see that there's sustained engagement with communities and communities feel that their voices is heard. And then also sustained commitment from services working together. And none of this is easy and none of this is quick, and it will take time. But that's, I suppose, in terms of it being successful, that there are initiatives, that there are responses, that those responses are community driven and community, from the community voice, but also it's a sustained piece, I think, would be the key thing there.
Thank you very much, Gráinne. I'll pass you over to Mick.
And just before we go to Mick, I just want to acknowledge the contribution of Martina to this authority, and it was alluded to in your interaction, and it's typical of Martina, very humble in nature, but she was the chair of the Longford pilot project, and the authority very much benefits from her expertise on what local safety partnerships are, because she has lived it in a real practical way, and we're very grateful for her insights to that. So I just call on Mick.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, Gráinne, just to let you know that we've engaged with people, stakeholders around Wexford over the last number of weeks, and we heard lots and lots of positive stories around the setup and the initial working of the local community safety partnership in Wexford. So I think it would be remiss of us not to acknowledge that. So they should certainly give themselves a bull of boss. Could you talk about the key lessons that have been learned from the pilot areas as it impacts on the ground with the partnerships?
Absolutely, and apologies, Elaine, I should have referenced that, Martina, and thank you, Mick, for saying so. So Liam and Mary here in Wexford and all of the local community city partnership team are doing powerful work already. In terms of the key learnings, I mentioned there earlier about the chairs and coordinators being success determined, so that kind of support infrastructure for the partnership members is very important. I also mentioned none of this is quick. The collaboration takes time to develop, and I suppose the partnerships will take it will take a little bit of time for them to get up, to people to figure out how to work in this kind of context and to develop their plans. So I suppose to give them that kind of breathing space to actually get established. And then when they are established, the key learning really is that when people are around the table together and they're open to not just sharing information with one another, but working together from the outset. So identifying solutions together that they can deliver together really, really works in terms of, I suppose, developing solutions and resolutions for community safety issues on the ground. I'm going to use I keep saying this, but it will take time, and it does take time, and that we're actually on a journey ourselves. So the first iteration of the partnerships being established in the pilots, we're kind of into the second phase now as we're rolling out the partnerships nationwide. Each partnership will serve a term of 3 years. There will still be a lot of learning, because the local context is really important. That's another key learning. So, Waterford, Longford and Dublin North Inner City, there's thematic some very similar pieces, but worked very differently on the ground. So the local is really important, and empowering the local. So I suppose that's been one of, maybe not a challenge, but something that we've been navigating at the outset, is trying to actually give as much, I suppose, discretion at local level and kind of development at local level, but yet having some level of consistency at the same time, so trying to navigate that. But the local structures and the local context is a very important element. And again, when the pilots went out to develop their plans, hearing what people on the ground are saying is a really, really important element of this being a success factor.
And just to continue with that point, obviously each local partnership will look to address needs in their own area. And obviously, again, there is a need and there is legislation there underpinning what will happen at the central level. And can you just talk about how those two can be married, like that local needs in line with national policy?
Yeah, and I suppose that there are statutory functions within the Act for the partnerships themselves as well, which includes the development of their plan and the mandate to listen to their communities. But I suppose there is some level of intersection. So the National Office for Community Safety, our role is to provide training, support and guidance, but it's also to oversee the implementation of plans. So, we talked there about, in terms of the legislation, that there's that mandate on public sector bodies to work together. There's that piece around the local community safety partnership. That is the working together of agencies at local level as well with communities. So those two things can marry up quite well, actually. So in terms of the local community safety plans, what we would hope to be seeing in them are actions that are collaborative. Do you know what I mean? That actually that they will be very effective at the local level, but they also feed into the national as well. I suppose there's that opportunity as well in terms of having a National Office for Community Safety and 36 local community safety partnerships, that there is this wealth, I hope, of information and best practice that could be maybe shared nationally as well. So if we're seeing a pocket in Wexford, for example, of particularly good collaborative working, and it's working for that reason, we know maybe not everything can be replicated because the local context may be a factor, but maybe actually there's been standard operating procedures developed between agencies at local level here in Wexford that actually that could work elsewhere. Do you know, so that's how the two things might intersect quite well. So in actual fact, the legislation supports the local as much as it does the national, because ultimately it is about working cooperatively and collaboratively.
And just in that, is there an avenue then for sharing a good practice as the good practice becomes embedded and recognised?
So that's what we hope to be doing in terms of the National Office. So we've a constant communication flow between ourselves and the local community safety partnerships. I suppose at the moment it's very focused on the establishment of the partnerships, but we're already hearing of examples of good practice on the ground. So there's a piece around, there's the opportunity for the National Office to share it up to the National Community Safety Steering Group and elsewhere, but also within the partnership network as well. And actually, I'm talking about the National Office, we're not trying to get in the way of things as well. The local community safety partnership teams are already engaging really well together and developing organic networks and sharing information between each other as it is, so I've seen examples of, so most of the partnerships have had induction meetings prior to their initial meeting, and we've seen instances where partnership coordinators from another area are sitting in on the induction meetings of the other, so there's a shared learning piece happening organically anywhere, and we're very much not trying to get in the way with that, but actually foster it and support it as much as we can.
The partnerships in a way replace the joint policing committees,
yeah.
And the JPCs are very focused on what the Gardaí do around the country. The focus, as I understand it, from the partnerships is much wider than that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And can you talk about that breadth of responsibilities or focus that the partnerships actually have?
As I spoke earlier, so community safety is a very broad church with a lot of agencies involved, and just I suppose one of the examples could be something like mental health, where that might be something that is a lot of Garda time might be spent on it, but it's actually a social service issue. So you have agencies like the HSE and others, community service, community organisations, etc., at the table. But ultimately, I suppose there's a couple of differences, if you like. So the Joint Policing Committee, as you said, was very focused on Garda. I suppose, what are the Gardaí doing really? But the Policing Community Safety Partnership has a much broader membership for a start, but also they are tasked with developing these plans which have a much broader range of issues that they may be dealing with and addressing. So, example of an action in one of the pilots, and I think it's Longford again, Martina, but it was around, I suppose, the traveller and Roma community and kind of engaging more broadly with them, not in relation to policing issues, but in terms of general community issues. So the actions in the plan are really the Bible, for some extent, for the community safety partnership. So it's around how are we delivering these actions. So it's a very solution-focused, action-focused kind of conversation, not just what are you doing, it's what are we doing, if you like. So the partnerships themselves are holding each other to account as well. The partnership members are holding themselves and each other to account.
In our stakeholder consultation, we've heard about the real need and the importance of listening to communities, but not just listening, but then delivering against what you've actually heard. Is part of your strategy about delivering on that, about the listening and then measuring the actions?
Absolutely, and I suppose one of the core objectives that we see for the community safety partnerships is building confidence in service providers, because we all know, trust is low in particular communities that may be particularly challenged by community safety issues as well. So, I know we keep referencing the plan, but it's a very important element, and it's not just a statutory function of the partnerships. But if you have an action plan and you have XYZ agency down as delivering that plan, it's the delivery of those actions that you'll be measured by, you know, so communities can see that's done, that's not done, we're waiting for that to be done. But also, I suppose, the community safety partnerships have a very important role in the amplifying of what agencies are doing, like, you know, what's being done in relation to community safety in their local community safety area, in their local, sorry, say for example, Wexford. So, and often, like looking at the pilots, often there was a lot of initiatives where the partnership was kind of the lead, bringing together a number of different agencies. Maybe it might be something like having a community and safety wellbeing event in a local area, or, you know, so there's lots and lots of ways, in addition to the plan, where the partnerships can, I suppose, both listen to community concerns and develop responses to, but demonstrate to the community that those concerns are being addressed.
Okay. And you're likely that's ever going to happen, but if I was the chair or coordinator of a local partnership, like, what could you do at the national level? What can you do to support what we're about? How does that work?
To support, just generally to support them, is it?
Yes, yeah. What support can they expect from yourself and from the national level?
Okay, so I suppose this is resource dependent and available, but as it is, we're bringing together the coordinators on an ongoing basis and providing support to them in relation to all the things that are emerging. But the chairs, as I said earlier, so the first step towards that will be that we will have we're developing a network for chairs, but also we're a mechanism for support. So queries come into us in terms of, well, how do I deal with this? How do I deal with that? As we move forward, we expect to have kind of regular engagements with the chairs of the partnerships and the coordinators and the administrators. And I suppose seeing, is there emergent issues, are there things we need to help them address on the ground locally or potentially nationally as well. So I suppose in terms of our office, that's a function of the office, is actually that provision of that type of support. As things are emerging, we may need to develop specific training modules, but I suppose at the moment it's a little bit of a blank canvas, so we bring people together and see how things are evolving and working. I suppose I should reference the guidance document that we've developed. So that guidance document, it's a big long document. If anybody has seen it, we'll have to figure out a bit of an accessible version of it. But that has, I suppose, quite a lot of guidance in terms of engaging with communities, but also I suppose the role of the chair, what the function of the chair is, and how that kind of, the role is very much around developing a collaborative, conditions for collaboration is probably the phrase you could use, or environment, and, you know, the engagement with members, not just in the meeting but outside of the meetings and so on, and you know, all of that. So I suppose the guidance document that we've developed and then ongoing kind of supports and training is where they would get support from us. And
is there bespoke training available, say, about the role of the chair?
Not as yet.
But I presume that will come.
We just have to, hopefully.
Yes, yeah,
and look,
yeah.
we provided kind of a role description, and we provided some kind of information in relation to that. On the 5th, I can't remember, yeah, it's the 5th of February, we'll be doing kind of a session on what the role of the chair is there. But it's not that we've developed bespoke training as yet.
Yeah. If I was approaching my local area to become a volunteer, maybe representative of some agency, to act on a local partnership, like, why should I do that? Can you give me the pitch?
Well, if you're not at the table, I know. No, it's a really, really brilliant opportunity to actually bring the voice of the community, but community like if it's a particular organisation. And I suppose just to say, you said if you were approached, a lot of the areas have I suppose, approached the same word, but they've come at their identification of members in a variety of ways. So a number of areas have done for an expression of interest. A number of other areas have utilised their PPN, you know, that kind of mechanism. So the being approached piece, you know, there is a piece around kind of accessibility of the partnerships. But I suppose it's a really important way of bringing the views and voice of that, whether it's an organisation or a community, into the table, and being able to be part of a conversation, really to start looking at how can we work together collectively to address issues that we all know are issues in our community. It's 6 meetings a year, if you want to know all there's 6 meetings a year, but it is like, I know we have people in the room here. I know Martina was the chair, obviously, and Joe was a member of a local community safety partnership. So my own experience is it's been a very valuable exercise for anybody who's been a participant of. I will say I was the coordinator of a similar structure before myself, and the members of that structure always reflected back how valuable it was for them, if nothing else, for the connections they made as being a member of that structure. And that's a huge piece as well, because that actually does facilitate other work happening as well. it's, you know, they made connections and they understood who they could pick up the phone to when an issue emerged, you know. So, but obviously they're representatives of a broader sectoral maybe or community, and it's important for those community voices to be heard if somebody is thinking about going forward.
Thanks very much for that, Gráinne. That's, by way of finishing, can I compliment yourself on the work that we've heard about has been done at the national level, but also to compliment the people, like people here in Wexford and in other places where the partnerships are being established. There's a huge amount of work has been done in a very short space of time, and thank you for your leadership in that. Some of my colleagues may want to ask something now, I'm not sure, but thanks for that, Gráinne.
Gráinne, could you outline maybe some of the actors or stakeholders that are on the partnerships?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Thanks for that. And just to follow up what you said there, Mick, that people giving their time to these partnerships is really important and valuable and appreciated. Really appreciate it. And I never thought to say who's on the partnership. So there's up to 30 members of every partnership. So the Garda Síochána are represented. So a bit of what I said earlier about the local kind of flexibility, but we wanted some level of consistency. So in the national office, we've been engaging with Garda Síochána, for example. So community engagement superintendents for a particular area are the representative on the partnership. And then we have HSE representation. So we've determined a particular rank and seniority there. In TUSLA representation again. And so for example, in TUSLA, the network area manager would be the representative, and then the local authority, a director of services. So people, it's very important that people can make decisions, you know, that are on those structures. And then we have seven of the local authority members who are very important, obviously, as well as the elected representatives for a particular area. So they will nominate themselves from amongst the local authority themselves, they'll be nominated by the local authority themselves. And then there's the flexible piece, you know. So we in the national office have given guidance on, I suppose we expect to have business representation, education representation, youth representation, new minority communities, and residents. So a minimum of 4 residents. So here in Wexford, there are 5 resident representatives. They are representative of each municipal district area in this county. And then what we're seeing coming through, so we've given some guidance around organisations or sectors that we would like, you know, maybe these are people who are particularly challenged by issues relating to community safety. But of the 20, so all members are appointed by the Minister for Justice, Home Affairs and Migration, and 20 sets have been appointed as of today. I think we've, as I said, 9 or 10 coming through at the moment. And of those, 19 out of 20 have older persons representation. So, 17 have domestic sexual gender-based violence service representation. Some actually of those have multiple representatives where there might be more than one agency in the area, or maybe community voluntary sector organisation. Local development companies come through very strongly there as well. We have 8, so Traveller and Roma representation, and about a third of them LGBTQI plus representation, and then almost just under half have people with disabilities representation. And there's other kind of mixes, there's homeless and mental health and all that, but it's broad. It depends on the local area, local context, and you know, just that's that flexibility piece, that what's happening in their local area.
And I'm conscious that there might be people online listening to us here today and wondering, you know, about what is local safety community partnerships and how they're different to JPCs, which people are very familiar with. So, you know, what exactly is the difference between a JPC and a local community safety partnership?
I suppose one thing there is that it's not just about Garda, it's that broader piece, and there's a much broader representation there. So like it's up to 30 members, as I said there, and with a wide variety of actors who have, I suppose, a remit in relation to community safety. And it's very solution focused as well. So it's actually about how we can all respond to these issues. Obviously, Garda Síochána are still a key partner, a very important partner, but they're not the only partner. Do you know what I mean? So it's a much broader range of responsibilities and people who can have an impact and remit in relation to community safety and in developing responses to community safety issues. So I suppose that's the simplest version. Is it's a broader church, and it's very solution focused, and it's a partnership. That's the other piece. Partnership and collaboration are key to that as well.
And my colleague Joe Costello is going to ask a question, and it'll be our last question, as we have engagement with the Garda leadership team at 3 o'clock, and we'll end shortly.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gráinne. Thank you for all that explanation that you've given very well. I was fascinated by your example there from Longford, and Martina's here with his done Trojan work and is now, about a separate entrance and a separate room for people who might have felt unsafe going to the Garda station in Longford. How did that work out, and is it something you would recommend across the board?
So in relation to the word unsafe there, I suppose it was uncomfortable as much as anything. So just to note that. And I suppose it works very well there because they happen to have this room and they happen to have that accessibility. So there is a little bit about the context there. It's working very well, and it does work very well there. I suppose it's whether that can be replicated. It would be actually, I think, something that if it could be replicated, it's very impactful. But I suppose there is that context of they happen to have the room available. It was some kind of a storeroom, I think, if I remember rightly. And then that they had this kind of buy-in that they actually, and I'm trying to remember now how they secured the furniture. There was, that the mechanisms for that. But I suppose it's a very simple solution to some extent, and it does make that nice, comfortable space, and it is much more welcoming. And obviously from the Protective Services Unit perspective, it's really effective as well. I shouldn't, be able to speak. I'm not trying to speak on their behalf, but it's been something that's been very welcomed. This is another example of, can it be replicated everywhere? Do you have the capacity to, there's all sorts of factors that might play into that. But it could be something that could be looked at everywhere. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much, Gráinne, for your engagement today, and the Police and Community Safety Authority look forward to engaging with your office and to meeting the local community safety partnerships on the ground. And as has been echoed, we had an absolutely wonderful experience yesterday with the Wexford local community safety partnership, and for me, I was wondering what the hell this is all about, and I think I got a lot of answers yesterday, and I just want to record my appreciation for those members who are sitting in the audience here today. I see the chair and the coordinator, and we look forward to seeing very concrete results of how communities can come together with their own infrastructure to sort out problems that traditionally may have been regarded as policing problems, but are problems that the community themselves can face. So thank you very much. got the purple here for Wexford today.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can I just have your attention just for a few short moments, just for some general safety information, just before we commence the meeting with the Garda Commissioner and his colleagues. Just first of all, if you can take note of the emergency exits to the right and at the back of the room here as well. And can everybody once again just check your mobile phone is switched off or in airplane mode. The meeting is streamed live, and again, you could be part of the record by being physically in the room. Just in terms of housekeeping, silence please at all times, but obviously if you need to leave the room, just do it quietly, and if you need any assistance, there's people in the room from the Policing and Community Safety Authority. As usual, today's meeting is an engagement between the authority and the Commissioner and his colleagues, so there isn't an opportunity for people to participate, it's rather here to observe. And with that, I'll just hand over to the Chairperson of the Policing and Community Safety Authority, Dr. Elaine Byrne.
Thank you, Helen. On behalf of the Policing Community and Safety Authority, we welcome you to Wexford. Our job is to oversee the performance of An Garda Síochána in delivering policing services to the public. This is our 7th meeting since we were established in April of this year, and it's actually our 4th meeting in public, and it's been quite a roller coaster a year for everybody here. And all of our agenda and minutes are published online, and we would encourage the public to look at those. Our next meeting will be in private on the 18th of December, and this is actually our first meeting in the community. And yesterday we met with community representatives, some of whom are in the audience here today. We also met with the local community safety partnership from Wexford, which is the first community safety partnership to be established in the country. And we also met with Chief Superintendent's team, Derek Hughes, in Wexford Garda Station. And on behalf of the authority, we wish to thank all of those entities very sincerely and genuinely for their time and commitment in coming to talk to us. That very much informs our work. It's a very useful engagement, and it's part of our listening process in understanding the nature of policing, whether it's in Dublin or Wexford or on the ground with the community. So again, just to thank you all very much for your time, and particularly with some of the communities that we met, their honesty was very much appreciated. Commissioner, I understand you were in the Rosslare port today. So before I begin the meeting, perhaps you can outline to us what you saw in Rosslare.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon to you and to all the committee members. First of all, I was very happy to hear that you met Chief Superintendent Hughes and some of the team yesterday, and I certainly hope that your interactions were fruitful. And yes, this morning I visited Rosslare Europort, and I met some of my team down there working in the immigration area. So that was very useful for me. As many of you will be aware, there's been a significant expansion of Europort Rosslare, particularly since Brexit. There's now 44 sailings in and 44 out every single week there. Obviously, there's a significant responsibility on us to check a lot of that traffic coming in, vehicles, foot passenger, and particularly the container traffic coming in. So we have a team of particularly dedicated guards down there working in that area. And obviously the threat of drug importation is obviously high on our agenda down at the port. We've had a number of particularly significant seizures of controlled drugs coming in there. It's been a route in from continental Europe. One of the things when at my meetings this morning, when I spoke to some of the people there, is the absolute terrible position that some people are put into who are smuggled into the country around illegal migration. So people obviously on the continent who are put into shipping containers. I don't have to say obviously outline in detail the risks around that, particularly some of the seafaring journeys to Ireland can be excessive 24 hours if there's delays at sea or whatever. And we've had some really close calls down there where we've rescued people from those terrible situations. So we've invested quite heavily ourselves. The Department of Justice obviously also. We will really welcome that OPW with the Department of Justice, Migration, Home Affairs, provide us with new facilities down there that will really future-proof our work down there, that particularly help us around the search function of vehicles coming into the country. So some of the detection devices that we have down there now are absolutely state-of-the-art, and they're obviously helping us to identify people that are hidden in vehicles. So a lot going on down there. I suppose it's a particularly unusual facet of policing here in this part of the country, but again, I'm sure you and some of the committee heard about it yesterday.
Thank you, Commissioner. And can you tell me why that's a policing function? Because I understand that that's not the case, say, in Dublin.
Thanks. Yeah. So border management is something that I suppose traditionally for many decades has been something that's been undertaken by Garda Síochána. So you and the committee members and many of the people who are watching today would probably be familiar with Dublin Airport. So Dublin Airport was always a place where we dealt with the border management function there. So as you come into the country and your passport was checked, they were always members of Garda Síochána doing that. But over the last number of years, we've moved to a situation now where there's a full-time border management unit who have freed up our officers from that type of work, which is really welcome. And our Garda National Immigration Bureau have been working now with the Department of Justice to move some of the other functions away from us around some of the ports. So, like I said, we're very happy that Dublin Airport, we don't have that function there anymore. Now, I suppose the reality is you're always going to need policing at ports and policing at airports. Because of border management, officials stop people, there's often arrests needed and there's detentions needed. But yeah, it's certainly a function that our preference would be that we weren't undertaking. So there is a plan that we have been working with the Department of Justice to try and move some of those functions away and maybe to an extended border management unit.
So, as I understand it, there are 30 Gardaí stationed in Rosslare. That's a lot of guards that could be deployed elsewhere if it wasn't responsibility of the guards as it is in Dublin. And you mentioned a plan, Commissioner. What's the timeline on that plan, and can the authority have oversight of that?
So I suppose I don't have the plan, unfortunately I don't have it in front of me, but I know some of the timelines. We have obviously medium and long-term ambition with it. There has been, I suppose, other significant progress around immigration and freeing up of officers in that the registration and re-registration function, which was another thing that we used to do all over the country, that's now been centralised in Dublin, and that we no longer have that function. So we've been able to free up over 100 officers around the country. But yeah, absolutely. Look, if you'd like that plan, we could certainly share it with you.
The authority would be very interested in that, and it certainly is an area perhaps we can return to in the future.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm just going to turn to my colleague Nessa Lynch now, who is going to talk on policing service delivery in the Wexford Wicklow division.
Good volunteer community members for giving up their time. So as the Chair said, I'm going to be focused today on challenges to policing delivery in this division, but as I think we'll get into, many of the themes here have relevance in the national context. So I want to first mention the area of how members of the public report crime and harm, and it's a topic that we've discussed before at authority meetings. But we've heard here in Wexford that community members are sometimes not sure the best method of contacting on Garda Síochána, whether they use the 999 service or whether they phone their local Garda station. So can you give us and the public here today the definitive information on when you call 999 and when you might use other methods of communication?
Thank you for the question. And first of all, I'm really welcome that we have this opportunity maybe to clarify some of this, because I think, as you rightly said, there's a lot of confusion around it. So what I'll do is, as you know, Paul to my left has done a lot of work around Garda Safe. He led out on a lot of our work around that. So Paul can certainly bring through the detail around that. But like I say, it's a really welcome opportunity for us, because I certainly do agree with you. There is some misunderstanding around it. So thanks for the question. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Commissioner. Just if I can help. So first of all, I would say Garda Safe was brought in about 2 years ago, and it's a system that assists us with the management of calls for service from Garda Síochána. And for members of the public that might be unsure as to what they should do if they require the guards, we will always say that if it's an emergency, you should ring 999. If it's a call for service, you can ring 999. But you can also contact your local Garda station. But what will happen is that if it's a call for service, in other words, if the guards are required to call out with the patrol car or whatever, that call will be transferred into the control centre. And that's because the Garda Safe system manages all of our calls, and when they go in there, the calls are recorded for safety and transparency, and we can also ensure then that the appropriate resources are assigned or detailed for the particular call, because the guards that are logged on will have different skill sets. We also welcome members of the public still to call into their station. Stations are very much open and available to take calls or queries. We know from reviews that we've done in the past that over 60% of phone calls to local stations are not calls for service. They're not emergency calls. They're calls looking for assistance, information, guidance on whatever matters, immigration or whatever that might be. But where the calls are calls for service, they'll be transferred in to the central regional control centre, and we have one of those in every region around the country. And I think we've about 1.2 million calls this year to date received, and an additional, I'd say 1/3 of those on top coming from stations. So I suppose to reassure the public, we absolutely want to hear from you at your local station, either by calling in person or by ringing the station. If you have an emergency, dial 999. If you have a call for service, you can dial your local station and be transferred into the control centre, or you can dial 999 if it's a calls for service, because they will triage the call, and there's trained call takers and call dispatchers, and they will decide or categorise whether it's priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. So I hope that answers your question.
That's great, thank you very much. So just building on that, we heard from some of the Chief Super's team yesterday about the value of intelligence-led policing. So particularly in relation to crime and harm, that it might not be possible to provide an immediate resolution, but the picture and the information given would build perhaps a wider picture of something that's happening in the area or a longer term resolution. But our question really, I suppose, delving a bit more deeply into that information that might come through from a call or a call in to a Garda station. What's the assurance that that information is consistently and coherently captured and goes into those processes such as the PALF process, the audit and that follow-up? So can you provide some assurance on that?
So could you maybe assist me, like what would nature of like a call, like what type of call are you talking about?
So I think what we heard, which we will delve into in a bit more detail later, is matters that perhaps were not followed up later, or things that a member of the public felt they reported, but there was inconsistent follow-up. And I suppose what we were wondering was, we appreciate what goes into the 999 system, but the information that would be received at the desk of a local Garda station or through a call there, what are the procedures to make sure that's consistently and coherently captured and that it goes into those assurance processes at the divisional level?
Yeah, so look, PAF, the PAF system, I suppose, is the key method for us to keep control, supervision, and audit over incidents. But as you rightly point out, there has to be an incident in place in the first place. So any of the calls that come to us, as Paul said, if they come to the station and the calls, where there's a call for service, that's redirected to Garda Safe. An instance created. The instance will be created at GISC on Castlebar, and then we have full understanding of what's going on. Of course, outside that, we're dependent on obviously the people who answer the phone and what action they take after that. We obviously have supervisors in place. That's their job, to ensure that the people who are answering those calls, that they're doing what they should be doing. But what I would say is, like, obviously, if it's anything that merits an incident, it's going to go on to Pulse, and then everything after that. So Pulse is the key thing for us. And obviously, we have IMS now behind all this. So, like, our focus has been on, if someone rings in, they have something that needs to be investigated. There's follow-up to that. We have audit around that. Obviously, I can't sit here and say every single person that rings in, they're going to be. There's not going to be cases in where maybe they don't get the response they should get. Obviously, I'm not going to say that. It's dependent on obviously individuals, but I mean, this is the policing business where we have to put a level of trust in the people and the training that we put into them, that we expect them, when they answer the phone and people say, I have a problem, whatever it is, that they then take action in it. If it's a local community problem, that they pass it on to local community police. If it's an issue that it's outside our policing responsibilities, say if it's something to do with TUSLA, if it's something to do with local community, whatever that is, that they advise them where to go with it. So, I mean, but this is all part of our training. So we expect people who obviously answer the calls, or it's the same to callers to the station. If people call to the station, we're dependent on our frontline members that they'll give them a good response. Now, obviously, if you don't get a good response, we're expecting, and I've said this, we're expecting, if you don't get the response that you think is correct, that you let us know in management, or you let FISRU know. There's a complaint mechanism around that. So if people do not think they're getting the service that they deserve, I mean, they need to let us know. So look, I hope that answers your question. I might just ask, I know Shauna obviously deals with our police and operations. So Shauna, is there anything you want to add to that?
Just that if people could bear with us, the reason that you get transferred through to 999 is that every call is captured. We did have a problem previously where people had rang and there were, we knew that there were challenges and it wasn't being dealt with from a governance perspective in the same way. So part of the system is to make sure that, we know that the calls are recorded. We can go back and take a look at them in terms of quality assurance, but also we can follow up and make sure that all of those calls have been responded to. So I know you've mentioned intelligence, which is a bit different than calls for service, but intelligence also gets added into Pulse. So we have two major systems that collate all this information, and where we can ensure follow-up, and supervisors look at that at every PAF meeting. So just at a high level, I hope that gives some assurance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I suppose an example that we might have heard from our rural community would be around things like, say, having an issue, you spot someone on your land with dogs, making that decision about, do I call 999? Is this something for the Garda station? So that's really useful clarification. So just building on the topic of rural policing, so we've heard about examples of reluctance of community members, and I think this would be borne out in the Garda Attitudes survey. A certain reluctance to call the Gardaí, and I'm a remote rural person myself, and I would think that some of this might stem from thinking that their issue wasn't serious enough for the Gardaí. But you would also hear things about, outlying remote rural areas. There's a station, the opening hours, people having difficulty, say, meeting a Garda to get a firearms renewal or another official form. So I'm interested in hearing whether your level of confidence about sufficient and high quality service provision for people who are in these remote and outlying areas.
Thank you. And maybe just before I go into that, if I could just quickly just revisit one thing that I just want to be clear, not just to yourselves, but anyone who's listening to this or even in the audience today. We're very keen that people continue to call stations and to come into stations. So, look, Garda Síochána is a complete community-based organisation, and the systems that we spoke about, that is to improve service. That's so if you need the guards to come to you, that's what that's all about. But absolutely, we encourage people still, if they want advice, if they want to ring the guards, whatever that issue is, outside you need the guards to come to you. You need a patrol car or someone on the beat to come to you. Outside that, I just want to be really clear, we're not discouraging people against that. In fact, the opposite. That's really important to us, that people still contact us and still come into us. And I suppose by extension, your question, I think obviously some of the rural stations, by their very nature, some of them only have one or two people attached to them. So by their very nature, they're not open, obviously, 24 hours a day. So, for example, in the area we're in at the moment, there's over 40 stations here. Now, I'm glad to say, even in this area we're in, they're all manned. Every single one of them have people attached to them. And as I say, by their very nature, some of them have restricted opening hours. But if there's anything that people need, there's always an urban centre. All our towns have Garda stations that are 24 hours a day. So any of the things that you need, they're available in your closest urban centre. Now, having said that, I'm completely cognizant of the distances in rural areas.
Yeah, I'd be 40 minutes at least from an urban centre.
Yeah, so I'm absolutely cognizant of that. But when it comes to calls for service, someone to come to you, absolutely. And I mean, the thing you raised, should people be reluctant or they don't think it's met a criteria or a level to ring the guards, that's something for us to decide. So I would say to members of communities, particularly rural communities, please do not be afraid to ring us. We will absolutely, if you ring us, we will look at it, as Paul said earlier, we will triage what you said. Obviously, the very urgent things we come to immediately, and then we will come to you. But absolutely, please ring us if there's anything you think is Garda related. And for me, some of the most important things actually aren't the calls to service. It's when people are worried. They're worried about their children. They're worried about their neighbours. They're worried about someone might be a threat. There's a whole range of things that people can let us know about. The other thing that's really important to us as well that people have to know, I mean, if you're worried or concerned about something, you can contact us confidentially. We have a confidential line, obviously, but the other thing is you can come and speak to a guard confidentially, and I mean, you can say, this is something I want to make the guards aware of. It's not something I want to become involved in myself. Whatever it is, there's a whole range of issues that would fall into that. And as Shauna said, there's matters such as intelligence. So if people want to come forward to us and tell us things, we're also, of course, we want to know that. So look, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So I might just move to a cross-cutting issue that we've heard, and I acknowledge that in our engagements yesterday we heard of some absolutely excellent service in terms of community Gardaí, and a number of Gardaí were name-checked by a number of community members, and that was fantastic to see. But we also heard some other things from the community. So members of the travelling community particularly said to us that every interaction matters, and it's very important for engagement and trust and confidence that every interaction is undertaken with respect and dignity, and that there's relationship building. And again, we heard of very good practice in that area. And we'll be delving further into the area of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence, but to note that some of those themes of inconsistent service, both in terms of excellence but also poor service, came up there. And community members said to us that they thought it was important that there should be further and community-led training in some of these areas, particularly around traveller culture, trauma-informed practice and community engagement. But I suppose coming finally to the question, we were interested in, obviously, community Gardaí will have particular specialisations, but I'd like to hear about what your expectations are for all Gardaí, from probationer, I suppose, right up to yourself and your senior leadership team, in terms of communication, cultural awareness, and those minimum standards for contact and handover.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, look, as the Garda Commissioner, how we deal with people, particularly on first contact, is so important to me. I was recently down at a graduation of 195 guards. I know Helen was there when I spoke. One of the things I spoke about, and I'm really clear in any interactions, is how important one interaction is that we have with people, because, and I've spoken particularly to our younger guards coming out, how important this is, that no matter how busy their shift is, how many calls they have on, that doesn't matter, because that one interaction with a person, that might be the only time they ever interact with the guards. And on top of that, if it's a bad interaction, not only is it with that person, but that person will obviously go and speak to their family, speak to their friends about it. So for me, there's no excuse for members of Garda Síochána who are ill-mannered, who are rude to people. And I know at the previous iteration of the authority, we spoke about this on several occasions about young people, and it's the same as that. I mean, at the senior leadership level, we have no tolerance for that. So, and you know, I would certainly see that as something that I would take particularly seriously about if members of Garda Síochána don't show respect to people, whatever communities they're in, and I mean that goes across the board. Obviously, there are communities who certainly more challenged communities, and then it's even more important. So obviously, you spoke about the traveller community. So given everything that grouping has been through and all the challenges that they face, of course, it's even more important with them how we deal with them. So look, I hope that is some assurance to you around the tone that I certainly set from the top of the organisation. I know everyone on this table would feel exactly the same about it. And I know I only spoke to Derek this morning about an excellent initiative that they have with the travel community down this part of the country. And I know Katrina, I'm sure if I asked her now, would speak about several that we have around the country. But like, again, I just cannot reiterate in the strongest terms. Like, for us, it's expected when you come into a Garda station that you're dealt with properly. So again, a message that I'll send out today, if you're not dealt with properly, you have to let us know. And, you know, again, we will take action on it if people aren't dealing with things properly. So.
And I suppose members of the community, and again, I want to acknowledge that we have heard about some really excellent practice as well. But how would members of the community who feel that they've had inconsistent or poor service, how would they bring that to your attention?
So I think there's two ways they can certainly do it. So now we've put in place community engagement superintendents right across the country. So, I mean, their name says it all. Their job is a community engagement. They can certainly write to the superintendent in their area. All those superintendents are set out on our website and what areas they cover. They can certainly write to them. There's other contact methods. They can look to meet them if it's, if they think they haven't been dealt with properly. Obviously, there has to be obviously an oversight mechanism where there's independence. So FISRU are in place for that. So that's another option that's available for members of the public. But I would certainly hope where service isn't at the level people would expect. I mean, they have to let us know about it. I mean, if unfortunately at management level, if we don't get to know about it, we certainly can't deal with it. And whatever that means is sometimes, if it means additional training, if it means, it could be at a level where it could actually be discipline. So, but I mean, we need to know about it. So that's what I would say to members of the public, two sort of main routes.
Thank you very much. So I just have one or two more specific questions, and then I'll have an opportunity for my colleagues here to have any follow-up questions. So just moving to two specific crime types that we talked about yesterday. So we heard yesterday about drug-related intimidation in the community, and though there may be a perception that this is an urban problem, we've heard that it can occur in the rural environment as well. And we've heard that there can be a sense of stigma and shame with people who are impacted by drugs-related intimidation, which might impact their willingness to come forward and seek support. So I'm wondering, can you let us and the public know about what services and support you might offer to people who come forward, and what ways you can encourage perhaps the people who might be more reluctant to come forward?
Thanks for raising this issue. Drugs-related intimidation is it's a really important issue for us to try and deal with. However, it is a really difficult one to deal with. Intimidation is part and parcel of the drugs business. So there is nowhere in the world where there is not intimidation involved in the drugs business. We've a dedicated inspector in every single division. We've trained them how to deal with drugs-related intimidation. Again, all their contact details are available on our website. So the first thing I would say to any member of the public is, if whether it's you, it's one of your children, they're being intimidated in relation to drugs deaths or whatever that is pleased to contact us. And of course, you mentioned one thing which is stigma. For sure, you're correct with that. But the biggest thing is obviously fear. So people are absolutely terrified if they go to the guards, what will happen to them or their children. And obviously, these absolutely terrible people involved in this business, I mean, they use this as a way of threatening people, and they say, if you go to the guards, X, Y, or Z will happen. What I would say is, please come to us. You can meet us. We can speak to you confidentially about whatever your issue is. There's also the DRIVE program, which we're hugely invested in, which is all over the country. And again, the website set out all the details and some of the supports around drugs-related intimidation, which are very useful. And we, some of the people who are involved in drugs-related intimidation, we have the ability, sometimes we're able to prosecute them for other crimes. So not just the one. So if you were being intimidated or one of your children, sometimes when that comes to our attention, we're able to prosecute them for other things where we don't need to use you as a witness, which is obviously very useful. And what I would say is we've had some very significant convictions. Only actually in this part of the country recently, we had 2 very significant convictions where people got multiple year sentences. So we have the ability to do that. But like I say, this is not an easy area, and my absolute sympathy goes out particularly to the parents and relatives of children who are involved in this. And some of the behaviour, it's absolutely horrendous. And you will have seen many of the stories in the media, some of the things that people do to try and enforce their debts. But I would certainly say, please come to us. We can speak to you confidentially about it. We can give advice. Even if you don't want to do that, the DRIVE program, if you even look that up on the website, you will see there's a whole range of supports and advice around drugs-related intimidation.
Thank you very much. And it was great to meet the detective inspector here locally who's responsible for that. So just my final question, then we'll have an opportunity for authority members to have a follow-up. So we heard about various crime types when we went to the Wexford station yesterday, and I wonder, there was a very interesting discussion about initiatives in this area around retail crime. So obviously retail crime is an acute concern, I think, particularly for small business owners. And I wonder if you agree, if we could give the Chief Superintendent to talk to us about some of the initiatives yesterday, because we were very interested in those.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, Commissioner. And can I just close out the last point by just adding in an appeal as the person responsible for policing in Wexford to anyone who is a victim of drug-related intimidation to come forward. We do have a dedicated detective inspector, and we've significant success in this area without going into detail, and people locked up until 2030 for drug-related intimidation. So I would encourage anybody who is a victim of that to come forward, because we will protect them in Wexford. So in relation to the question around some of our new initiatives, we recently were very fortunate to have a Garda analyst allocated to the Wexford Wicklow division. And that analyst is at HEO level, and his job is to crunch through all the data that we have available to us to indicate where our crimes might be rising and falling, and where opportunities for interventions and countermeasures might lie. So in September, I tasked the analyst with looking for an opportunity, and he found one in Enniscorthy where retail crime, retail loss prevention and retail crime were an issue, and they were on the increase. So we had high numbers in August and high numbers in September, and he started work on it in September. So what Martin did is he crunched the data, and he came up with some very, very clear and discrete insights for the superintendent to action in Wexford North. And they relate to the time of day that the crimes were happening, and also the days of the week and where they were happening. But it was very focused and targeted insight or recommendations that didn't, typically in the guards, historically we have told somebody, you're on the car for the day, you're in the beat for the day, you're in the station for the day. But this was very, very confined to a particular period. So the superintendent took it away, and he took maybe somebody who had a duty taking statements in the morning, and he said, well, you go to that shop between 2 and 4 on Thursday and Friday. That's when these issues are happening. And as an initial, I suppose, exercise to see how the analysis was fitting in. So having 48 theft from shops incidents in North Wexford in August, 44 in September, we had 15 last month. So we're absolutely delighted with that as an intelligence-led, analytically based tool to inform our policing strategies, and to give those key insights to our policing managers to action at the morning path when people are being detailed for duty to bring down our crime. And what that will do is it'll allow us to do more with less. As is well canvassed at this point, the demands on An Garda Síochána are increasing all of the time, and when we can do more with the existing resources we have, we're in a better place. So it's an early result. We're very much looking forward to the November and December results, and then we're going to expand it out to other crime types and look for other things. But I suppose I'm a strong believer in intelligence-led policing, and the big win for me is the rest of the management team in Wexford are now queuing up to get Martin Services to look at their data and say, how can you help me with this? Because the superintendents are very busy with lots of different issues, and this has been an excellent addition to the team. And I will say that we've put Martin as part of the management team now, and he attends all our management meetings.
That's great. Thanks very much. We were very interested to hear about that. So I might offer an opportunity now if there was any of my authority members who had follow-up questions.
Helen has a follow-up question, but before I do, Commissioner, I grew up in a pub not that far from here, a very rural part of the country on a crossroads. And, the vice when we were growing up was alcohol. And I know in my community, in a certain generation in rural Ireland, they don't always have the language to describe what's happening to them when it comes to drugs and drugs intimidation. They don't know where to go. There's an enormous stigma that's around it. There's a shame and there's a fear. And I think in rural communities, and we were just chatting to Joe in our meeting this morning, and there's an isolation in rural communities that's not always in other areas of the country when it comes to dealing with these kind of issues. And what I was really struck when I was when we were talking to your team down here in Wexford, and we referred it to the Al Capone method, that Al Capone wasn't convicted for being a crime boss, he was convicted for tax evasion. And I see, for instance, your roads policing are very apt and key in convicting people for roads offences, not necessarily for burglaries or crime offences or drug offences, but for other offences. So for someone listening in today that is from a very rural community who doesn't even know what the name of these drugs are, and the impact that's bringing on their family, what would you say to that person?
Yeah, Look, and thanks for bringing that up. And I do completely appreciate how difficult it is for people to come forward. But what I would say is, particularly around drugs-related intimidation, it's the people that we have selected for that are the right people to do it. So, for example, Derek spoke about his detective inspector down here. We've got people who have huge experience. They've been through this many times before. So while you might think that you and your children are in this unique, terrible situation and as you say, you might not even understand fully what this is all about. Someone might have called to your door and said, for example, we are going to burn your car out unless you give us X, Y, and Z, whatever that is, and they might not even understand what their own children have become involved in. You certainly need, or I would suggest, you certainly need to come to us and we will see and try to explain things. And again, for us, there's never any judgment. I mean, we see people who, not just in this crime type, but in all sorts of situations, get into terrible situations. But I mean, obviously, as a police organisation, you know, it's our job not to judge people, but it's our job to help you and assist you. So I would certainly say you need to come to us. We'll certainly sit down, and particularly around drugs, we will talk to you about the different options that are available. So there's a whole range of options that are available. Some of them, they don't involve the criminal justice system at all. But like I say, if you don't come to us, we certainly can't help you. But like I say, the people that we have, I think, just to reiterate what I said a minute ago, this is not going to be the first time they've seen this. You might think you're completely unique, or you may think this is a situation that you've been foolish to get involved in, or whatever that is. But I mean, that's not the case. This is all over the country. I mean, this is a really difficult situation. I mean, the drug situation here in Ireland is really concerning, and obviously some of the violence that goes with it. It's like I said earlier, these are completely associated parts of this business. It's violence, it's intimidation, it's everything else that goes with it. So.
Some of the information that someone might engage you with could be useful in a different context in tackling this issue, and they may be, to use parlance, but they may be got at in a different way. Yeah,
absolutely. And the thing about information is, and again, this is something that I always say to young guards as well, sometimes it can be the smallest little piece of information. That can be the last little piece of the jigsaw that we need to make an association, or whatever that might be. So if people think they might have something useful that they think we should know about, they should certainly come to us. And I mean, that goes, again, across the board with different things. If people see things they're worried about, they're concerned about, I mean, they should be coming to us. They should be telling us about it. And again, if you come to us and you tell us, you know, whatever this piece of information is, of course, we don't take everything on face value. We're going to look into it. We're going to examine it. If we work out, okay, the person was wrong, that's fine. There's no problem with that. But if you genuinely think you know something, or particularly around the drugs business, and you think we should know about it, like I said, we have the confidential line you can ring in. You can do that. You can certainly come to us. You can call us. And we will deal with that in the most confidential of manners.
Intimidation lives in silence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Our CEO, Helen, has a quick question, and then I'm going to turn to Tony O'Brien.
I'm on, sorry, apologies. I just want to return to something that you were discussing with Nessa there a few minutes ago, and you asked for some specific examples in relation to, you know, and again, I think it's just important for the public in terms of those calls for service. And it's almost like if I give you an example, say I'm in Enniscorthy, and I'm not picking on Enniscorthy, it's just I'm from there originally. I'm in Enniscorthy and I come out of my house in the morning and I find that my car has been keyed and my tyres have been slashed. My instinct would be that that's not life or death. I shouldn't ring the line. But actually, would that be a case that I should ring 999 because I need service from you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing, just to go back to what the chair said earlier, it's really important that in those type of situations, people just don't go, well, there's nothing the guards can do about this, or they're not going to find out who did this, or my shed has been broken into and my bicycle has been stolen. This isn't a thing, no one's going to find out, or no one's going to be able to solve this. No, you absolutely need to ring us. Absolutely need to ring us.
But do I ring 999 or do I ring Enniscorthy Garda station?
If you want the guards to come to you,
I should ring 999.
Like that, you ring 999. And like I say, I think the thing about ringing 999 is people think, okay, this is what I think maybe some of the issue with this. People think if they ring 999, they are blocking up people getting urgent service. Someone who's, say, is being attacked, or someone observes a sexual assault or something like that. That's not the case. We've got a whole triage system, and Paul spoke earlier about our call takers and our dispatchers and how well we have them trained. We've got a whole system that we've invested hugely in, absolute state of the art, as good as you will see anywhere in the world. So when you ring in with your call, we will take it and we'll go into an order. Now, of course, we mightn't come to you straight away. In your case,
exactly, it's triaged.
We may not come to you straight away, but again, it's really important that we know about it, because that example that you give, that could be one of a series of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or say if some evening I'm walking and I see some dealing at the side of my estate, I should ring 999 in that case and let you decide the call for service.
Yeah.
Whereas if I can offer an example, if I need my gun licence renewed and I want some information on that, I might call the local Garda station to get that information. Would that be a fair categorisation of it? So when I need the guards, and the important bit is ye do the triaging.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when somebody calls 999, it gets into the system, and there's an incident, and there's follow-up, and the governance clicks in automatically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, just to reiterate, if it is any way urgent at all, you ring 999. There's no question about that. That's really straightforward. If you ring a station and it's something that needs the guards to call to you, as Paul explained earlier, it's going to go into our system anyway.
But it just means you're going through another.
You're delaying.
You're delaying getting your service on the list.
But like I say, your example that you gave, it's a query about a gun license. It's a query how I do something. Can I come in at some time to get a passport stamped? What do I need? Like any of those things, fine, absolutely ring us. Yeah, we're more than happy to deal with that. You can call into us, you can ring us. So what I would say is, again, just to try and keep it simple, like general queries for sure ring into us. But like I say, if you need us to come to us, to you ring 99.
Yeah, and even if people think, because often it came up actually in our discussions with the community around, well, there's no point in bothering the guards, I've had some machinery stolen. It's really important, even if you can't detect, that we know as a nation, what's the level of crime, be it rural, be it fraud, be it any of these things. So thank you very much, Commissioner.
And like I said, just to finish off, again, that could be a little piece of the jigsaw we need, around a visual, or it can help us to maybe do other work. We might look for CCTV, we might look for ANPR, we might look for something else that will help us with that example that you've given. So for sure, if people definitely need to ring into us if they've been a victim of crime, definitely need to contact us.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Tony O'Brien is now going to talk on community safety and partnership working together.
Good afternoon, Commissioner, and welcome to you and your team. Earlier today, we had our first public engagement with the Director of the National Office for Community Safety, which, as you know, is a whole-of-government approach which recognises that An Garda Síochána can only be one part of the wider jigsaw of creating genuine community safety. So I wanted just to ask you to give us an overview of your perspective on the value of local community safety partnerships, and how you would hope that they would contribute to community safety and your work through AGS.
Thanks for the question, Tony. So look, this has obviously been a long time getting to this. Back to 2018, this was first suggested. And obviously, we're in a transition period now because we're moving from JPCs, which were obviously police-led. But I mean, we welcome the move to the LCSPs. I think the important part for us is we're going to have shared responsibility around community safety. I think at the moment we've had 4, I think Cork City, Donegal, Waterford, Wexford, they've had their first meeting, so we've had 4 so far. And Derek is here, so Derek can certainly maybe speak to maybe the experiences of that first meeting and how they've gone. But look, I'm happy to say even in next week it's supposed to, or actually later this week, Longford, Monaghan and Westmeath, and then there's various dates towards the end of the year for the rest of them. There's, again, as you know, there's 36 in total. So we have assigned 62 community engagement superintendents to to work with these, to attend the meetings. We've obviously, they're fully briefed, they have a full understanding of how it is to work. So obviously from our point of view at senior management, we're very optimistic and being very positive towards it. We've obviously, I know you met the director this morning, we've met her ourselves. She's come to HQ, she's given us a couple of briefings around the plans going forward. So like I say, for us, we're definitely approaching it in a very positive manner. And I think personally, I suppose this whole of society, this is a model we need to move to, not just in this, but in several different areas. So even when we look at other areas like child safety, domestic homicide, various different things, we need to certainly move more multi-agency. I think it's something maybe that we traditionally were quite weak at here when you compare to some other jurisdictions. So for me, again, like I said, we're looking very positively. But I might ask Derek, Tony, if you don't mind, maybe you can just maybe share some experience of that, because I think Derek might have been actually the very first meeting. So thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we have had one meeting of the local community safety partnership here in Wexford. It's very early days. However, our hopes and our aspirations for the partnership and working together to keep people safe are very, very high. And I say that because on our management team in Wexford, we have extensive experience of working previously with JPCs on really important quality of life issues like addressing and tackling antisocial behaviour during the nighttime economy, supporting vulnerable people during the pandemic period, various other drugs ruin lives initiatives through rolling out through sports clubs. So we know the value of partnership. And indeed in Wexford, immediately preceding the stand-up of the local community safety partnership, we had a wonderful project in, I'll describe it as North Wexford because I know the community involved wouldn't be overly impressed with me identifying the area itself, but we had a problem with antisocial behaviour involving young people. And I know from speaking to the superintendent, our policing response to it was our usual policing response, which is to throw guards and overtime hours, patrols and checkpoints at it. And we did that to a cost of about 800 policing hours. Now, we then adopted a slightly different approach to involve a more multidisciplinary approach, and our crime prevention officer and Wexford County Council came to the table and brought various parties to the table. And I'm delighted to say a few short months later, having focused on amenity development, engaging with youth groups, involving young people in planting and in the development of it, we are now spending 0 hours in that area. And it was a very clear demonstration to me and to anyone who may have been concerned about the partnerships and their effectiveness, that they work very well together. So our hopes are very high. We can't wait to get, as I said, it is only one meeting. I know there's been a steering group meeting that is putting together a 3-year plan, but we're very much looking forward to making similar impacts in other areas as the partnership proceeds.
Thanks for sharing that example. It was interesting that yesterday morning when we were engaging with community groups, they called out the very same example, and then your management team told us exactly the same story, obviously from a slightly different perspective, but very much the same story. And it's probably appropriate to be having this discussion in Wexford, which despite some claims from Galway is clearly the first local community safety partnership to have been established. So we acknowledge and congratulate many of the people who are in the audience on that achievement. So given that we're already seeing these early shoots, I wonder, Commissioner, could you just talk to us a little bit about what your riding instructions are to the other divisions as they begin to engage with their community safety partnership?
Yeah, so look, obviously I think I've mentioned a couple of times in my previous remarks around the positivity. I mean, we're very encouraged by the executive director and some of the briefings that she's provided to us around the potential benefits to it. And I think one of the really important things to me, and I've spoken to some of our senior management people around this, is obviously the community feed into these. This is the community is obviously key to this. Their feed into it, but again, if you look at the structure that's set up for that, one of the important parts of the community is new and minority communities. So for me, I think this is really, could potentially be really useful for Garda Síochána, because I know even some of the earlier remarks around some potential difficulties that we have with some of those groupings. So I think for me, it would be really useful if some of that feeds up through these groups. I think that's going to be very helpful for us. And then obviously we'll have our community engagement superintendents there to hear some of this. So I think that's going to be, if that's how it works, that will be really useful for us.
Have you as yet developed an approach to how you'll measure the success of your team's participation in the local community partnerships?
Yeah, look. I think as Derek has said it. I mean, it's very early days for us at the moment. I think one of the concerns for me, and I think I raised it with the executive director. One of the briefings she gave to us was that all agencies would contribute people at a similar level. So one of the concerns that I certainly held was we would be seen as maybe to the forefront of this new setup, because obviously in the JPCs we were very central to them. They were very much police-led. But from what I've heard so far from some of the people from my people I've been talking to, that's not the case. So I'm actually quite encouraged by that. So. But I think I might just bring Katrina in. Katrina is obviously the Assistant Commissioner with responsibility for community relations. So I might just ask Katrina, Tony, if she's any comments in relation to the measurement. Thanks, Katrina.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, all of the board. Just in response to that, business readiness, getting involved on Garda Síochána's role within the local community safety partnership, where we're moving away from a policing focus to a whole of government, whole of society approach. And we're looking, rather than at policing, looking at the broader societal aspect of community. And one of the game changers is it's a statutory footing. You also have, who you've heard from today, the director of the local community, the national office. The game changer is you have a coordinator. So that is a big piece compared to the former joint policing committees. And that coordinator, especially in relation to the actions that will come out of those meetings. And what you're doing is, the whole approach is to work collaboratively, rather than it being a policing issue to public community safety. How are we going to prevent crime, reduce harm, but improve the quality at local level? That's our piece feeding into it, but the collaborative approach. Then in relation to business readiness on Garda Síochána's perspective, is in relation to the boundaries. So it's aligned, so the 36 local community safety partnerships are aligned to the local authority boundaries. And just to say today that all of the superintendents that will be representing, there's a maximum of 30 on the local community safety partnerships. But those community engagement superintendents, we have a dashboard that the Garda Síochána Analysis Service has, a dashboard of crime data that will be available to those superintendents attending. And I'm glad to say that that's aligned to the local community safety partnership boundaries. So they will have that information, which will be very relevant. So again, it's the wider approach. What I'm seeing in is from the pilots. So the pilots, you had Waterford, you had Longford, and you had Dublin North Central. And in that, even the initiatives that have crossed over, the local community wardens, that piece, that was very successful in Dublin North, and how that passed across to Waterford. Also, the antisocial behaviour initiatives, where they're being mirrored across. So it won't be the community safety plan that is part of the rollout and the work of the local community safety partnerships. that will feed into, that will dictate a lot of the actions and the work and the commitment and the collaborative approach. Thank you.
As Nessa mentioned earlier on, one of the striking features of our engagement with community groups yesterday was a number of times individual community Gardaí were name-checked from different actors, the same names. We actually had the privilege of meeting one of those, a crime prevention sergeant, yesterday. And they do seem to be an extraordinarily powerful way for An Garda Síochána to connect with community leaders. And I think one of the things you're going to have to contend with is the demands on their time that will emerge from this new way of working, which may require some review of resource allocation, I suspect. But just to conclude, before any of my colleagues may have a question. Helen, do you have a question? No. For me, engaging with the community partnership here in Wexford yesterday brought the whole thing very much to life. And when that was reflected back by Chief Superintendent Hughes and his team, I think we have the seeds here of something that is going to be really quite transformative, and obviously we'll be wanting to have conversations about that and how it rolls out in the coming year. Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, I think it's very worthwhile for the authority when we go out and about and we hear the great work done by community guards, and I think there's something that both sides of the table are in agreement with, is that we'd all, and indeed the public watching and listening in here today, is that we all would like more community Gardaí. And I know one of our first meetings, Commissioner, you talked about the resource constraints and the trade-offs that have to be made, but it must be very comforting to know that people not only want more community Gardaí, but almost in unison can name them off so quickly. And but it is some, and the previous authority had wrote a report on the issue of community policing, which you're aware of, and we, as an authority, I think would certainly encourage you to, when you're making those trade-offs, to make them in the direction of community policing. Helen has a question.
Sorry, just a supplementary on something that Tony said that just struck a chord in terms of your own ambition. I know there's been a lot of discussion over the past number of years about how the approach to that national framework piece. And I know it's something you're giving some thought to. Again, you know, is it going to be small areas? Is it going to be a wider piece? How you would resource it? Do you have any sense of when a kind of a final decision might be made on that national perspective, and will that feed into some of the discussions? I suppose it's separate to the local community safety partnerships. It's more about your role in terms of your own community policing.
Yeah, so I can't really give you a time frame today, Helen. I think this. First of all, I'm really encouraged, obviously, when I hear any of this positive around the community Gardaí, but I think this is a framework around the numbers that we have where they are. We can't look at this in isolation because we need to look at it around our wider deployments, and I think I've spoken at one of our previous meetings around some work that we're starting around that. So it will definitely form part of that, but so that's work that we're just trying to finalise financing around, some external support around. So I think until, and again, I suppose to give a sense of what I'm actually talking about with that, what we really have to get a really good understanding in Garda Síochána is where we need our people, how we work out how many people we have in the different divisions, what the breakdown is between plainclothes and uniform, and then the specialisms, so the community policing, the drugs, the Division Protective Service Unit, the armed support. So we've got a really good formula for working out how we do all that, and then we have a way that we would review it depending on changes with population or challenges. So community police is going to be part of that, but obviously to give reassurance, and again, as I think someone said there a minute ago, I think everyone on this side of the table, for sure, we want to keep on our community Gardaí. That's it's really, really important to us. It's actually, you know, it's central to our whole organisation. So, but, you know, to get to final numbers around that, we're nowhere near that yet, Helen, but I think this bigger piece of work will inform that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And our last item on the agenda today is responding to domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. Emma Reedy is going to lead on that, and Joe Costello is going to come in then. Emma.
Good afternoon, Commissioner and team. Domestic, sexual and gender-based violence is a significant national issue, and I suppose through not just our engagement yesterday with community services specialist providers, but over the last few weeks, we've heard about it as a very significant and highly prevalent issue in this division. So I'm keen to, I suppose, understand or to, I suppose, speak on the issue of domestic abuse and sexual abuse in the Wexford division, and how, with levels, your services is able to provide to the demand.
Thanks for the question. So I'll obviously ask the local chief superintendent to talk about the local area, but maybe before he does that, again, I'll just reiterate how important this is for me. And again, I've spoken about some of the recent information we have around how victims are not satisfied. Significant percentages of those around our response to domestic violence. So obviously, as incoming commissioner, this is something that I certainly have to tackle. One of the really important things that I wanted to do early on was meet some of the key partners in this. I just met Cuan last week. I've met Women's Aid, and I went down to both their facilities and met them and some of their teams, and this is one of the issues that I brought up with them to get their perspective. Obviously, I've got myself and the team here have our own views on it, but I think it's really important that we get an understanding. Obviously, we've got your inspectorate report. We obviously have that, but I think it's really important for me to get an understanding from the NGOs what they're seeing and what their views are on it. And then our plan in relation to how we're going to do that, that has been the subject of a number of our senior leadership team meetings in the last few weeks. So we haven't finalised our plan around that yet, but it's certainly a priority matter for me. And I think even when you look at the recent public attitude survey, well, there's obviously lots of positive things in it that I could talk about, and I've done some of that in the messaging. When you look at what the public are saying, what they think are priorities, if you look at the first two of them, number one is sexual crime, and number two is domestic violence. So, I mean, for me, it's absolutely clear the public want more focus on this. Obviously, from what I've heard myself, we know that, and again, all the team here would be aligned on this. So, you know, but having said that, look, I certainly don't want to, particularly to people who are in the audience or who are maybe watching online, I certainly don't want to give a negative impression towards what we've done, because, I mean, in the last number of years, we have made significant progress from where we were, and you'll be well aware of all the work that we've done around, you know, we've spoken about it many times, so I won't labour it, our DPSUs, our callbacks, our various bespoke operations such as Devise, all these various bespoke operations led out by our national teams, the risk assessment tool, now moving that to an app, our messaging even in public, and again, the 16 days of activism is on at the moment. We're obviously very involved in that. So we have done lots and lots of work around, and obviously my predecessor as well, it was really important to him, and obviously all those changes I spoke of came in under Commissioner Harris. So look, I just give those sort of opening remarks. So I might just hand over to Derek, who maybe will talk about maybe the local work here. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I suppose to deal with the question in the two parts that the Commissioner alluded to, domestic violence and the sexually related crime. Domestic violence in Wexford is on the increase, or reported domestic violence is on the increase, and reported sex crime is on the decrease. Now, I suppose we are satisfied that maybe the increase in relation to domestic abuse reports to us is a positive thing, and that people have confidence in coming forward to An Garda Síochána. And what we do when people contact us in Wexford, the first responders, it's a priority one call, so the first responders go out and deal with it and have first contact, and that's dealt with urgency. We do the callbacks, as the Commissioner referred to, within 7 days. And we also have another couple of layers of support. We have domestic violence sergeants and inspectors who have a review and oversight mechanism. And we also have a risk evaluation tool which is completed in respect of any domestic. Now, when a risk evaluation tool is rated as high, we also add in a layer of extra feedback, review, support and advice to the victim, in that a member of our protective services unit of detective sergeant rank contacts that victim. So we have a number of different layers of contact with victims. And I suppose the training, and it's worth mentioning the training and what underpins that contact.
And we ourselves might come back to that, Chief, if that's okay. You yourself mentioned the Garda Inspectorate report and the public attitudes, and I suppose where feedback has also been mentioned quite extensively today. Bearing in mind, we want people to come away with satisfied responses and feeling like that will impact on how they see An Garda Síochána and how they will hopefully engage with them in the future. Bearing the level of dissatisfaction that has been cited previously, has there been anything with the Wexford division in mind that you have enacted or responded to improve levels of satisfaction across the division?
Just before Derek answers that, if you don't mind, just for 1 minute, I just saw something just this afternoon I think might be interesting. We have every incident that happens, say last night there was 10 incidents, they're reviewed the following morning by our PAF teams, right? So these are guards and some of our Garda staff. They review them and they see what should be done with them. And it was really interesting. I went to the PAF office in my visit to Wexford Station this afternoon. I met the team there, and it was really interesting. They brought me through exactly how they do that. But one of the things, I was really happy to hear this. One of the things one of the guards said to me, completely unprompted. We weren't discussing domestic violence. He said, if I see an incident here and a guard has gone to it and they've classified it maybe in the wrong area, they've put it down as attention and complaints or something like that. He said, I'll read the narrative and I see this as domestic violence. Obviously, this is something really serious, and this is what he said to me. This is really serious. I'll reclassify that immediately. I'll bring it to the attention of the inspector who runs the PAF management meeting every single morning. And then he said, I will put an alert on that so it comes up at, they can bring it to management's attention on regular occasions. So and the only reason I say all that is I think the message that we have been trying to put for a long time from senior management is the importance of dealing with these correctly. And like I say, I went into that office and they went through a number of incidents, but just to show the importance some of the guards on the ground now place on, if they see something that isn't being done properly around domestic violence, either by error or omission or whatever way, they were really on the ball to correct that. So, like I say, that was really good reassurance for me just to see that in action. But I might hand you over to Derek then. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. So, in respect of the Wexford division, the Wexford Wicklow division, but specifically Wexford, the Garda National Protective Services Bureau commenced running seminars on this issue last September 2024, and 26 of our frontline staff have attended those briefings. In addition to that, all of our Protective Services Unit personnel have training in that area, and all of our probationers, 15 of whom were allocated to Wexford in 2025, come out of Templemore with that training. Now, also, I can advise that on the 16th of December, a CPD core programme is rolling out to all frontline staff in Wexford to cover off incidents like coercive control, COCO's law, online abuse, and first contact is necessarily a part of that training. So I suppose from my perspective, and I suppose this relates to how much we welcome the authorities' visit to Wexford, it has provided us with an opportunity to tell you, as we did yesterday, something about how we do our business. But it's really importantly, there's a learning opportunity for us in this, that if we're not reaching the standards that people expect around that contact piece, that's a takeaway that we've taken away from our meeting yesterday and from this meeting today. And as I can tell you, that date was preset weeks and months ago, but in December we'll commence that, and we'll have a sharp focus and we will give every victim in this space the contact that they deserve and should expect from Garda Síochána in Wexford.
And that's very positive to hear, because from the first or initial contact, I suppose we would recognise that whether it's through the regular, the community policing arm or the specialist arm, that where it relates to the responding, the recognising in the first instance what they're seeing, types or form of abuse, the responding in the form of the path that will take, and the referral and the link to specialist services, that all matters, and I think that's been touched on hugely today. And we heard through that community engagement there again of really incredible and stellar examples of where communication is very, very strong, particularly in the community policing, where engagement is sustained and it's recognised and it's familiar to people. And again, in the specialist arm, there were, however, examples that we did come across where there are gaps in communication, particularly for victims and for services, including specialist services that work directly with victims. And it was important to hear about that idea that feedback counts, complaints are important, to know the escalation route. But there is a strong sense that came through the victim engagement that victims feel let down. They feel confused by where communication stops and starts and starts and stops. So the messaging there really that came through for us is looking at how victims can rely on communication being from the initial to the ongoing to the sustained, counted upon. And that for us matters because it relates to their initial contact in relation to that matter, but any future engagement they may have with Garda Síochána.
Yeah, thanks. And look, your points are all very well made and certainly accepted. And I think, without a doubt, we in Garda Síochána have a huge part to play in the victim's journey in domestic violence and sexual crime. However, as everybody in the room knows, it can be a difficult journey through the whole criminal justice system. So, like what I would certainly say, we certainly have improvements to make, but even if we do our very best, it can often be a very difficult journey for a victim through certain elements of the system. And sometimes, for sure, dissatisfaction on the final outcomes, some of it is outside our control, but look, like I say, I accept everything you say. We certainly have, I think like I said earlier, I think we've come a long way, but we certainly, there's always room for improvement in this. And I mean, it's such an important area, and I mean, the people who are victims of these horrendous crimes, I mean, the very least they deserve is our support and the good communication. That's the very least they deserve. And then obviously whatever we can do around prosecutions, etc., obviously really important. But they can often be difficult for a whole myriad of reasons. But I might just ask, I know Sean is obviously in charge of police and operations, so, and again, in charge of the organising serious crime, which this whole area falls in. Is there anything you'd like to add, Sean?
Yeah, I just want to point out, so the Eastern region is overseen by Assistant Commissioner Paula Hellman, who's to my right. I can tell you I go to our performance assurance meetings across the country, and I've been out here on a couple different times this year, and every time I've come out here, whether it's for a PAF meeting, which is the performance assurance meeting, or for another meeting, there has been a particular focus on domestic and sexual crime, even down to looking at exactly what is tracked the next day with respect to callbacks, what is the quality like, what does that look like? So really putting a focus on that, and I'm delighted to see that the Commissioner came today and saw how that looks on the ground. But certainly from a leadership perspective, I think it's been top down, and while I know it's not Wexford, it's Waterford, but I do think body-worn cameras is something we need to talk about in this space as well, in terms of we have seen cases, and I can't speak to individual cases, but we've certainly seen cases where this has been a powerful tool, particularly when you're dealing with victims who are not empowered to speak, or there's a moment in time where certain information comes out and then other dynamics take over. But I absolutely take to heart what you're saying in terms of the contact. It's something we've been speaking about a lot. We've done a lot of work in this area in the last few years, and it's a long journey. We've got a lot more to go, but I do know that in this particular region overall, that there has been tremendous focus on it by the Assistant Commissioner, and I do think that that leadership perspective is helpful in seeing the numbers go up. We want more people to report, and we have more work to do in this space. Thank you.
I might, just for time, pass over to my colleague.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you all very much for your answers. Both Derek and obviously we met your team yesterday, and yourself, Commissioner, and we met all the stakeholders again yesterday as well. And of course, as was mentioned, it is in the public attitude survey indicates that this is the top priority by the public. So that's why we're really homing in on this in a very intensive fashion. And Emma has covered a lot of the initial reaction and so on. But I'd like to have a look at the training side of it for a moment. And, sexual abuse and domestic abuse have very complex dynamics, very complex. I mean, there's coercive control, there's intimidation, there's trauma, there's fear, and then there's the entire logistics of going to the court, being witnesses, called back, and so on. It's a huge issue. It's a huge issue entirely to get the totality of it. And I'm just wondering, Commissioner, are you satisfied that your training programs are adequate to deal with the complexity, the dynamics of the abuse that we're dealing with?
Thanks for the question. First of all, you're completely right. It is a very complicated area. So we've put a lot of time and effort in relation to our foundation training. So obviously people are brand new into our organisation. We have a whole set of classes and instruction in both these areas, in domestic violence and in sexual crime. So everybody brand new into the organisation, when they come out, there is substantial training for them. Then when they come out here and say, for example, they come here to Wexford, there's a continuous professional development series of classes they need to attend, and some of these areas as well fall into that. And then around some of those cases you spoke about there, those very complex ones, the very complex ones obviously fall under the remit of the Division of Protective Services Bureau. So the training they have, and again, I would say you're talking about, it's as good as any of our comparator services, if not better. It's module training, in person, expert training delivered, multi classes and modules, often down in Garda College. Our National Protective Services Bureau or Central Bureau lead out on a lot of the training. So the people going into those units, very, very, first of all, to get into them, how we choose them, they've got to go through an interview process even to get into those units. So we pick the very best people, the most suited people to go into them. We train them really, really well. Then when they get into those units, they're mentored by people already in them. We have a whole series of supports in place for those. It's really difficult work. I visited the DPSU this morning here in Wexford, some of Derek's team. And I mean, when you think about it, even I spoke to a member of Garda staff there this morning, and the member of Garda staff was telling me she types up all the statements from the victims. So you can imagine, and she's doing that for several years there, you can imagine every single week she is typing up some of these accounts of some of the most horrific abuse that people are subject to. So again, we provide supports for all those people. So look, I think to answer your question, I'm quite satisfied around people coming into the organisation and the specialist units, and I think maybe the place perhaps that we need to turn a bit of a spotlight on is, say, our people who are already in service for a number of years. And Derek gave a very good example earlier, how here in his area, what he's doing is his continuous development people are running a course Derek was talking about here in December, where they'll talk about some new aspects of sexual crime investigation that are coming in, coercive control, etc. So I think that's a really positive thing to hear. So look, even from, and it was really useful this meeting here today, even from that, again, I'm sure myself and Shauna will be talking about that, about maybe, what level that's at around the country. So, but I think, again, to go back to your question, I think, definitely it's a complex area and we have to be on top of the training in it. Like one of the things, we've been to a load of iterations of training in particular foundation training, but I think what we've settled upon, I'm quite satisfied about it. Obviously, it's something that there's always developments in it. It's not straightforward. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to lead on from that, then that's the training side of it and the importance of that. But then to lead on for the importance of communication, interagency communication, the sharing of knowledge, the support services that are there and your relationship with them. Again, can you give us an idea of how engaged you are in that respect?
So what I would say, we're obviously engaged on a local level with the various local agencies, both statutory and NGO. And again, I'm sure Derek spoke about some of the engagement here with some of the refuges, which is very good, I understand. But I think on a national level, so as I said, I did visit Cuan only last week, and I spoke to the director there. And, again, I was heartened by what she told me around the level of cooperation and interaction, communication between ourselves and Cuan, and it was the same in Women's Aid. So again, I think we've done a lot of work around this. Our Garda National Protective Services Bureau Detective Chief Superintendent Noonan, again, I'm sure you will have seen him even only a couple of days ago. He did media around this. So we've our detective superintendents, our detective inspectors in this area. We spend a lot of time and effort around some of the communications training, some of our strategies around it. Any of our significant prosecutions, and we've had some really significant ones in the last couple of years, we always make a point of doing communication afterwards, where not only do we talk about the case, and Sean and Paul will be very familiar with some of these bigger cases that they've dealt with. We talk about the case, but we also talk to victims directly and say to them, that they should come forward, that this is an example of, the work that Garda Síochána can do. So I think, again, your point is very well made. Communications is really important in this area. So it's really important that we get the message out that people should come to us. And again, that we try and show that we have professionals in place, that they don't need to be afraid if they come forward, that they won't be dealt with properly, they'll be dealt with compassionately, and they'll have a professional response. So, Shauna, you want to add to it?
I know it's a little bit adjacent to what you're talking about, but I know that you received the updates to our domestic abuse intervention policy, which was published in January of this year. And you'll notice as well that the victims of crime policy and procedures were just published on November 14th. So I think a couple things. One, they're much more comprehensive than had existed in the past. It does give clear guidelines in terms of at least setting expectations and standards. This is important in terms of sort of setting the table for other work that needs to be done. And then as an example of that, you talked about training. training follows policy. So you can see the building blocks are coming. As I said, we're on a journey. We're not there yet, but there are key building blocks, and these were huge to get out of the gate. A ton of consultation and work went into them. So I just want to note that because it touches on all of the areas that we've been going back and forth on today. Thank you.
Thank you. Finally, we met some of the stakeholders yesterday, and we know that there's absolutely tremendous work being done by the support services in that respect. And we're delighted that now, Commissioner, that you're making this and your team making this a priority issue, because it is in the public mind a priority issue. So obviously we will be returning to this very often again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I certainly welcome the authority keeping a focus on this. Is very important, not just for the public, but look, it's very important for us as well. And I mean, without a doubt, some of the advice and guidance of obviously the previous iteration of the PCSA was really helpful for us around some of our changes. So absolutely welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Before I conclude the meeting, I think Chief Superintendent Hughes, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I suppose I'd just like to, we're talking about a very, very sensitive issue, and I just, as this is a public meeting, would like to take the opportunity to speak to anyone who is a victim of this type of crime out there, that should they contact An Garda Síochána in Wexford, they will be met with nothing but empathy, sympathy, support, advice, and the highest level of professionalism in the investigation. And I would encourage them to trust us and come forward and report to us.
Thank you very much for that important message. And Helen just has, this is the Commissioner's favourite part of the meeting, the list of actions arising from the meeting.
And actually, you'll be glad to hear unless my notes are bad, I only have one action which you're going to come back to us on, which is the plan for the divesting the border management at Rosslare, that you'll come back to us with the plan on that. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, so unless, Commissioner, you have anything left to say before we conclude the meeting?
No, thanks obviously for the meeting, all your interaction. Really appreciate it, and thanks for your time with all our team the last couple of days. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. That concludes the meeting in public in Wexford with the Police and Community Safety Authority and the leadership team of An Garda Síochána. And we look forward to having our next public meeting is early in 2026, and we will meet the Commissioner's leadership team in 3 weeks, in just before Christmas, Christmas present for the leadership team. So thank you very much, everybody, for engagement here today.